And thanks very much for having me. And as Kayla said, my name is Kerry. I'm a Net Zero Task Force member and I'm a project manager at an organisation called Regen. So as Patrick's just highlighted, the three key areas that we're going to be exploring a little bit more, energy kind of sits across all of those. So these slides are just to give you a bit of an update, a bit of an overview rather, as to how energy is used in Devon and where it comes from. So this slide here just gives you a bit of a breakdown as to how much energy we do use in the county. So you can see on the pie chart on the left there that the split is fairly even. It's about a third, a third, a third between industry and commercial, domestic use and transport. So just in case that's unclear what I mean by that, domestic is sort of within the home, industry and commercial is business and creating things and manufacturing and such, and transport is fairly self-explanatory. So this costs us in the county about £2 billion every year for a total of 23,000 gigawatt hours. And that energy comes from a variety of different sources. So hopefully you can see there on that pie chart, the vast majority of that, or nearly half, is coming from petrol, diesel, oil. And the rest of it then is a mix of various different sources. So gas is nearly 30%. And then you've got a bit of coal still in there and a whole variety of other sources. So this energy produces 62% of our greenhouse gases. So it makes up a significant proportion rather of our greenhouse gases. This image here, you will see across the bottom of that graph, that's time. So that's showing you across from 1998 to sort of present day. And this shows you the mix of our electricity generation by fuel source. So you can see there the orange bit at the top is coal, and I think what's interesting on that, you'll notice if you look out towards 2020, you'll see that chunk has been getting much smaller. That's being phased out deliberately in order to start to get us towards net zero. But you'll see that other parts there are increasing as we get towards present day. So in the middle there, you've got the can you see my pointer? The wind and solar portion here is getting much greater as we sort of got towards present day, increasing from fairly modest starts over here. And you'll see gas is still in there quite significantly, which is seen as a transition fuel as we move away towards more renewable sources. Here is a little breakdown of how we generate renewable energy rather in Devon. So you'll spot here, we've got 22%, so almost a quarter, is onshore wind. Here we've got biomass, makes up quite another quarter of it. And over here on the side, solar PV, ground mounted. And what I mean by ground mounted is when you're driving along and you see fields that have got solar panels in them, that's ground mounted, as opposed to rooftop when you see them on top of people's houses. So you'll see that nearly well over a quarter is ground mounted solar. And then the solar PV on the rooftops makes up another 8% over here. And this is equivalent to just 7% of our total energy consumption. So it's a good start, but it's only 7%, which is also equivalent to 30% of our electricity consumption. And as you know, we are here to talk about trying to get to net zero. So what is it we need to do to actually get there? So you'll remember from that first slide, I had the third, a third, a third. So the industry and commercial, the transport and the domestic. And there are different sort of strategies, if you like, that will be applied to each of these to try and get us to net zero. So it might be a mix of electrification of green gases and carbon capture for some of those industry and commercial elements. By green gases, I mean things like methane, which is from the treatment of waste and hydrogen. Electric, that's clear what I mean by that, and then carbon capture as well. And then for transport, we're looking at a mix of being electric and hydrogen. I won't dwell too much on transport, as you're going to have a presentation about that later. And then domestic, so within the home, so that's again going to be a mix of electric and green gases. So that's to move us away from these fossil fuels that are pollutants to get us to that net zero. To do that, we're going to consume twice as much electricity as we do today, because as you spot throughout that, there are elements in all of those sectors that are going to have to be met through electrification. So that's going to be more renewable energy sources, so more solar, more wind, and moving that transition fuel gas completely away and completely phasing out of coal. it's important to note then that the first point on here is to use less energy. So we need to reduce demand and use what we have efficiently. You'll notice on the previous slide, I said our consumption is going to increase by twice as much as it is today. That's without us doing anything to reduce our demand. So we need to do that. You'll hear more about that later on. So that's being largely within homes and buildings is where we can control that the most. We need to move to many more renewable energy projects, so wind, solar and green gases. And then we need to be able to store that electricity and use it more flexibly. So sometimes if the wind isn't blowing anymore, the sun isn't shining, we can capture that from when it was and then use it later. So we need to be able to be a bit more smart with our system. And then when there are fossil fuels that we need to continue to use, so perhaps within some of those industrial and commercial sectors where we might be finding it a bit more difficult to decarbonise using electrification, we then need to capture that carbon so it can be stored to prevent it from getting into the atmosphere. And there are some really important things that will come out of this, as well as just generating the electricity that we know we need to do in order to get to net zero. So if we can increase the amount of renewable electricity, renewable energy rather, and storage that we have in the county, that's going to increase the amount of jobs opportunities, opportunity for upskilling, of changing sectors and creating new employment opportunities in the area. We'll be able to grasp innovation opportunities, so new things such as floating offshore wind, which has just started to be really quite popular. We've got opportunities there to be at the forefront of these and really gain some advantages and be quite innovative. And the same with hydrogen. And we can engage our communities more in local energy issues and energy investment, which will mean that people can really start to see those benefits, can understand a little bit more and can reap some of the financial benefits back into our communities. And then there are opportunities, of course, as well for the use of district heating. So this is, instead of using the gas networks, we can have district heating where hot water can be piped around them. And we've already got a few district heating networks in Devon. And by developing further, we can get a few more. As I mentioned, some of the co-benefits. So the financial returns. So if we own our energy locally, the profits from the schemes can be reinvested back in Devon. And that £2 billion that I mentioned on one of the first slides that we currently spend on energy can be retained in the county, or a portion of it could. As we move away from fossil fuels, we can then transition some of those jobs. There are up to about 192,000 jobs across Devon, Cornwall, Dorset and Somerset that could be created through this transition. And of course, the final one, and the final one there, we can help to improve people's health and well-being. So people currently living in homes that are perhaps cold and damp, and this can cause health problems. So by improving our housing stock, we can help people there, we can reduce the illness, and we can reduce levels of fuel poverty for people in the county. So that's everything I was going to cover there.